Welcome back, everybody, to the Quill and Query podcast. My name is Brandon Hall. As you can see, I'm Ashless today, so a little bit of a hiccup with the intro there. Ash is not feeling well. She's under the weather. We hope she feels better. But as you can see, I am also joined by Atlas Creed today, author of Armitage and founder of Indie Author Connect. Atlas Creed, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good, man. Thanks for the introduction. And hopefully Ash feels better.
Yeah. Like I said, forgive any hiccups along the way, please. I'm used to having my co-pilot here, but we're gonna roll with it. So what I like to do, Atlas, when we start off Quill and Query is I like to give a little bit of a reading update and a writing update for our audience. Normally I do this with Ash and the guest, but since it's just us today, how are you feeling about sharing a reading update? Are you currently reading anything? Or are you kind of busy with the start of the year like many of us?
I'm kind of all over the place, but as always, I have like multiple readings going on. It's kind of a disaster at almost any point in my life. I'm doing a beta read right now for a fellow indie author. I'm listening to the audiobook for another fellow indie author that I'm getting through. And I'm trying to finish up an audiobook by a traditionally published author that I really enjoy, Brent Weeks. I'm on book 4 of his Lightbringer series, Bloodmere. So I'm like a little over halfway through that. And that's my chaos right now.
Yeah, I like the word chaos for my TBR as well. I'm currently reading an indie published book called 11th Cycle. It's very Dark Souls inspired, so if you like those games, definitely check that out. And then for audio, I'm listening to The Hobbit because I've never actually read The Hobbit. So
Really? Okay.
yeah. Right. Yeah, it's an interesting first. I got the Andy Serkis version of the audiobook, so it's interesting to hear him narrate. All right, well, that's going to do it for our reading update. So I'm going to jump into some podcast updates for everybody. Real quick, shameless Blades for Hire plug. If you have not yet pre-ordered or signed up for ARCs, you can now do so. The book releases for everybody in 2 weeks. So if you did sign up for ARCs, those have been sent out. For those of you who don't know, this is a dark fantasy anthology featuring myself, Ash, and several other indie authors, and all the proceeds are going to the charity Book Trust, which helps with children's literacy around the world. So support a good cause and get some great fantasy stories at the same time.
I'm going to beef on your plug there.
Yeah.
What's the topic of the anthology, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I totally skipped over that. So the title is Blades for Hire. It's all mercenary stories, so fantasy sellswords. Yeah, very, very fun. We have a lot of great indie authors that you'll probably recognize in there as well. So yeah, totally check it out.
Nice.
And then if you also want to be a guest here like Mr. Atlas, our guest form is in our link tree, so be sure to sign up. We try to get everyone on that we can. Obviously with our tight recording schedule, sometimes we gotta make it work in creative ways, but we would love to have you on if you're an author, a narrator, anyone in the literary world. We'd love to talk to you. And then before we get into our meat topics for the interview, Atlas, I'm gonna shout out an indie book release. I only have one, but if anyone has any others that they would like me to shout out in the comments, or Atlas, if you have any you want to shout out, feel free. But I'm going to shout out Defiled Oceans by Seth Campbell, which came out February 4th. That is the 3rd book in his Eldritch Depths fantasy series. So if you haven't read that, now would be the perfect time to catch up. But congratulations to Seth on releasing his new novel. Atlas, I know you're head of Indie Author Connect, so is there any indie releases you wanted to shout out here, or should we move on?
Oh no, I got quite a few that I could shout out. I'll do a quick through. Wingbreaker by Megan Musgrove, What Lies Beneath the Tide by Daphne Parker, Paragon Exordium by Michael Milwassel, and we'll toss out Flipside by Loomis Lutnak.
Very cool. There's a couple in there that I haven't heard of, so I'll have to add those to my TBR, as if it's not long enough already.
Right. It's just ever growing to this like empty void.
Yeah, void is a great way to put it. All right. Well, I'm sure like you, Atlas, I'm also working on several writing projects at the moment. So me and Ash like to check in with our audience and give them a little bit of an update on where we are. I know, like I said, with Ash, it's kind of a little off format here, but do you have, I know you're working on Heritage, I believe, of your current series. So feel free to jump in, but I do not have a writing progress update for you guys, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I've been mostly focused on getting this into the hands of readers, so writing has taken a back seat for now. But how about you, Atlas? Have any good writing progress the past couple of weeks?
Actually, yeah. So it's been months since I had a good work in progress update, but recently I just
Mhm.
finished up two new chapters. I could not tell you what the overall word count is of the book. It was kind of early on into writing this one, writing five primary points of view.
Mhm.
And as I was trying to figure out, like I usually got held up, okay, who should I write for this next chapter? And it just became a little bit too much of a headache. So I separated all of the characters out into their own documents and
Okay.
decided I'd just write just a straight linear story for each of them, see where they intersect, and then eventually I'll puzzle piece them back into one whole book. Last I checked, though, I think I was at about 45,000 words. At this point, I'm probably just over 50,000. I'm aiming for about 100 to 110, so halfway through that. On top of that, I just finished up a short story, my first romance comedy. It's going to be in an anthology coming out later this year, and I started a like a I don't want to say middle grade, but that's more the I guess the target audience that I'd be going for. But it's a Christmas story. It's a fantasy Christmas story,
Yeah.
kind of tackling all the different personalities of Santa. That Odin was the original, and he kind of passes the baton on to different people. That's why you get Saint Nicholas, Kris Kringle, Père Noel, so on and so forth, as well as like these kind of weird niche things like the reindeer and the sleigh. And I'm just kind of making it like a fun kind of uplifting fantasy story, if you will.
That well, first of all, props to you for juggling so many projects, but also that Christmas story sounds very very intriguing. As someone who's very festive, I'll definitely have to check that one out.
I'm hoping to get it out by Christmas of this year, so fingers crossed that that works.
Yeah, it'd be a little weird to release it like in the summer, right? So
Right, yeah.
all right, well, I have some fun kind of icebreaker topics to help us get into like the interview groove here. These are before we talk about like your novel or anything.
Okay.
But you feel free to plug it in there anyway if you see a opportunity. So topic one, this is based on some interesting posts that I've seen, but that authors like to do, like what are your chances of survival in your own fantasy world? So I wanted to pose that question to you. One, I wanted to do it from like two different angles. So like if you were dropped into the setting of not just your story, but maybe your favorite story as well, what do you think your odds of survival would be? And what's kind of your reasoning for that? You can go for both your favorite story or your own story, really, whichever.
I'll go for two. My
Mm-hmm.
own, as well as the Brent Weeks one that I'm reading right now. Either case, I think my survival would be pretty low. On mine, it depends, because part of my story takes place in Northern Virginia in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
I lived through that. I feel like I'd do pretty good, pretty, 100% success rate there. But if I landed in my fantasy world of Idramir, which is being consumed by like this fucking, sorry, cursing,
You're good.
this blackness known as the Shadow that's just consuming everything, I would probably not fare so well. And Brent Week's story, the Lightbringer, is basically this magical world where some people have the ability to bend light on different colors of the spectrum. Some can only bend one color of light, others can bend multiple, and then you get like one person that can bend every color of light. I think I do pretty well until the wartime breaks out, in which case I just be kind of ducking and covering. It all depends on where I landed in that world.
Yeah, I think that's where I'd be too in any fantasy setting, really. All right, this one may be controversial, but writing snacks. Okay, bear with me here. Some of us writers need a little bit of fuel while we're writing. I don't know if you fall into that camp, but if you do, what are you reaching for? What are you taking from the pantry to your computer as you go to sit down for a writing session?
I'm like a early 2000s high school gamer. I'm almost always I usually don't go with a snack, but if I do,
Mm-hmm.
it's Mountain Dew and Doritos.
The classic, right?
Yeah, the game feel. There you go.
I I have since stopped drinking soda as much as I can, but when they like re-release the certain game fuel flavors, I do have to pick those up. I have to admit that's my guilty pleasure. Brings me back to my
Yeah,
like Halo 3 Xbox Live days. But
100%. Yeah, Mountain Dew Pitch Black was always my go-to, and every once in a while they bring that back to shelves, and
yeah.
it's like my dose of nostalgia, just
Yeah.
leading to my eventual early death. You know,
I love the grim twist at the end there.
that's right.
All right. The last one I have here, Atlas, is one that I like to post to all of our interviews. It's really just about writing advice and kind of the dual nature of it. But I want to hear from you. What is the best writing advice that you've ever received? And then also, what is the worst writing advice that you've ever received? And I want to know how both have impacted your writing. I think the internet is full of writing advice that's good and bad, and mileage may vary for people. So I like to get this from everybody. So fire away.
Oh, so the best writing advice that I ever got, and I have no idea who said it. It was quoted in a Facebook group back when I first started writing. I was big into Facebook groups, and it was basically like nobody can write the story except for you. So
Mm-hmm.
that kind of renders all advice, not useless, but you take it with a grain of salt because you're going to find your own style, you're going to find your own voice. It's going to be different than anybody else's. It's like your own little author fingerprint. So it was nobody can write the story except you. So that was the best piece of advice that I had heard. The worst piece of advice that I have, there's dozens. It's basically anything that's absolute. Like you
Mm-hmm.
must do this or you must do that. It's typically pretty garbage advice, especially because the best advice I heard was it's all case by case.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point. There's very few absolutes in writing, and usually when people pose those rules, the first thing I do is I look for something that breaks what they're saying, and I usually find it pretty quickly. So
Oh yeah.
completely agree there.
You even get like my favorite author, Stephen King. He's got a rule that adverbs pave the path to hell. That's what like a famous quote from him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he turns around and every one of his book he uses adverbs. So
That's another reason not to give like absolute advice too, because you may end up breaking it yourself and then be like, wait a minute.
yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, with those fun topics out of the way, I think we can get into the meat of our author interview here, Atlas. So I'm just going to start off with the first question here. For those who might not be familiar with Armitage or the kind of stories you write, tell us a little bit about it, kind of your elevator pitch, and then go into more detail about what readers can expect when they pick up your novel.
All right, elevator pitch. This book is an amalgamation of genres that was inspired by movies like Identity, 13 Ghosts, Stir of Echoes, as well as my love for crime, mystery, and thrillers, if you will, like James Patterson or Lee Child. So Armitage is about this girl, Rebecca, who goes to a hotel, gets trapped in a hurricane, power goes out, and she discovers that she's in there with a killer. That's the quick elevator pitch.
Nice. So it seems like you practice that quite a bit.
A lot of conventions and stuff like that. It changes from time to time, depends on where I go. That's more
Yeah.
the paranormal thriller pitch, and then I've got like a more fantasy driven pitch, if you will.
Gotcha. So let's get into the detail of it. You say it's kind of a genre mashup, right? So
Mhm.
what genres are we mashing up here? What makes up the I guess what's the makeup of Armitage is what I'm trying to say.
I originally started the pitch as a dark urban fantasy because it is an urban fantasy. That's the most accurate description with a lot of horror elements. I
Mm-hmm.
think people will find that as soon as they dive into it. I mean, the first chapter, you've got a villain inspired by Dexter, and it's no holds bar. It's very graphic. And he's kind of even talking with his own dark passenger, if you will. The prologue right before that is the main character herself being manipulated by that same presence into attempting, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, right off the bat, it's very dark, but then it relies on a very heavy crime mystery thriller plot. So it's told from two perspectives. Rebecca's dives into much more of the paranormal or fantastical. People call it paranormal. I still say it's fantasy element of the story, and then you've got Nico, who it's very dry, very grounded in reality, and it's just a crime mystery from his side of things.
Gotcha. So it sounds like the two POVs that you chose are very distinct and unique. They each bring
Hmm.
something different to the story. That's very cool.
Absolutely.
So you talked a little bit about some maybe comparable movies or films that inspired you. Did you pull from any authors that you read growing up? I know we all do, right? But
Right.
who would you say are like your greatest your inspirations for writing this?
So as far as authors, actually the main drive inspiration that kind of kicked me in the butt to get this started was Stephen King's Mr. Mercedes trilogy. I read Mr. Mercedes, I was like, man, I would love to write a nice mystery thriller. So that kind of kicked me into gear. And of course, I'd read lots of his horror books, so his style kind of bled into my inspiration. But I'm also a big Agatha Christie fan. And then, of course, like I said, James Patterson and Lee Child. So I think that their style of storytelling for when it comes to like, twists and thrillers and mysteries and stuff like that kind of bled in on its own. And then,
Hmm.
of course, as I was writing, I started reading Brent Weeks near the end of this. So that kind of started, bleeding into my style a little bit as well.
Gotcha. With writing Armitage, did you feel that there was like any gaps in the market for your story, or did you not really concern yourself with trends or market gaps or anything like that? You had a very specific story that you wanted to set out and tell.
I definitely had a very unique story that I wanted to tell, and I didn't want to change it too much to meet the market. I mean, I think mysteries and thrillers kind of always have a place in the market. I mean, you
Yeah.
see it with books, you see it especially in TV shows. There's like a million detective style, TV shows where it's you got a regular detective and then some goofy or out of place person helping them, like the show Lucifer or Bones or Psych or any of those.
Yeah.
So I felt like there was a place, and I didn't really need to shift too much. But even if there wasn't a place, I kind of felt the story just kind of in my heart, and I just wanted to tell it as it was and not change it too much.
Very cool. So you had a very solid vision from the start, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the process then, going into it with, such a solid vision for the story. What was your writing process like, kind of from, beginning to end, writing the first draft to the very last?
It was a roller coaster. I got three kids, so anything related to a routine or process was kind of out the window. It's do what you can when you can kind of thing.
Yeah.
When I was writing this, I was actually working a second job in a call center, and there was a lot of downtime between calls, but I had to be at my desk, so that kind of forced me away from my kids, and it gave me a lot of time to write. I am no longer working that job, and I'm finding out real quickly without forcing that time um, for that routine. It's definitely making it more challenging. But the first book was two POVs, and there was a third one kind of sprinkled throughout. So when I did sit down to write, my process was, which point of view am I relating to more at this moment, and which one do I feel more immersed in? Then I would sit down with that POV, figure out where I was in their story, go back and maybe read from the beginning of that chapter because I almost always stopped in the middle of a chapter or scene. So I'd go reread a chunk of my text to kind of get me back in that headspace, maybe make some tweaks as I go, and then just kind of pick up where I left off from there. And that was just the best way that I found to kind of reinsert myself into that story.
Gotcha. With you mentioned sitting down with, what POV you felt like you connected to the most on a given day. Did you ever find that you were connecting more to one and struggling with the other, or did you find it was pretty balanced?
For the first book, I feel like it was kind of balanced. Both characters have they're kind of like a self insert of me. One when I was like a high schooler, woe is me, lots of emo music kind of thing. So if I was really down in my feels, I kind of
Yeah.
jump into the main character Rebecca, and I think that kind of helped make the teenage kind of approach or perspective or outlook on life shine through. And then Nico, he's 24 years old now, kind of getting his life in order, throwing away like the irresponsibility that he was familiar with. And I feel like that's kind of me. So when I was feeling a little bit, in my parenting vibes and stuff like that, it was easier to jump into his. Um, I can't say whether one or not was more challenging for me. They both came out kind of naturally. But with the second book, I can say that I'm trying to attack some characters that are a lot less like me.
Hmm.
And I do find it very hard to connect to them sometimes, but other times I'm just I wake up, I'm in that headspace. I'm like, let's do it. Let's get it done. And it's a lot easier to dive into their character.
Yeah, and totally okay if this is still top secret under wraps. But how many new POVs are you looking to add to book two?
So technically, so I got 5 POVs. Only one of them is new. There's another
Mm-hmm.
new one in there, but he's kind of more like a mechanism, and it's not really his point of view that we're concerned with. It's another character in his point of view, but they're like asleep and in a coma the whole time, so it has to be told from his perspective to kind of set the stage.
Mm-hmm.
But really, for the primary perspectives, it's only one new point of view. The other characters are, they were in the first book. It's just we never
Okay.
were inside their head, if you will.
Yeah, makes sense. So did you
Yeah.
find those characters maybe a little easier to get into than the one who's brand new?
Actually, the one who's brand new has been the one that I'm having the easiest time writing.
Oh, okay.
Um, Yeah, the familiar characters. So if you've read the book, there's a character that's inside her head. It's a god, or in this book, I call them guardians, named
Mm-hmm.
Rylos. He's actually the most difficult for me to resonate with. I had a good streak earlier this year, or well, earlier last year, I should say, where I was just kind of like knocking out chapters and storyline and plot points for him. And then it just like fell off the face of the earth, and
Yeah,
I haven't been able to get it back yet.
I can understand why it might be difficult to connect with, something so supernatural. So,
All right, yeah.
all right. Well, we talked a little bit about writing process. What was the publishing process like for you when you did finish your final draft? Did you immediately know you wanted to self-publish, or did you explore trad publishing at all at first? Just how did that all go for you?
I was kind of in this weird balance. I had self-published a kid's book under my real name initially, and that was kind of I did it primarily to get myself more familiar with the process. I'm a very hands-on person, so just reading about the stuff isn't good enough for me. I have to actually get involved.
Yeah.
Um, but for this, when I finished up this book, Armitage, I decided I was going to try querying, just because I was told almost any writing, the Facebook writing groups that I was in, I was told that that's the more guaranteed way to go. That you're a real author if you go that way. I sent out about 40 queries over the span of about 3 weeks, and I didn't even wait for a response from one of them. I was like, no, I'm gonna do this myself. I've been doing a ton of research leading up to this point. I've self-published before. I'm familiar with it, and I don't want to have anybody come back and tell me to change. So before I even heard a response back, I just started setting up the process to self-publish.
And with your self-publishing, did you go KDP, Ingram Spark? How did you do it?
So I did dual. I posted to both KDP and Ingram
Mm-hmm.
Spark. Originally, I did ebook on both, as well as print. And then 3 or 4 months after publishing, I decided to take my ebook off of Ingram Spark and go exclusive with that on KDP, just so I could take advantage of the A+ content, as well as Kindle Unlimited, which has been great. Because of Kindle Unlimited, I have had 0 months since publication that were zeroed out as far as any kind of money coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be the common consensus with authors that I talk to is, that Kindle Unlimited provides a lot of exposure that they don't think they would otherwise get.
Yeah.
So speaking of exposure, this comes with trad publishing too, but especially in indie publishing, we're doing a lot of our own marketing. And so, you had a pretty large community over at Indie Author Connect. So I'm sure that has played a role, but how has the marketing been for you? Did you have Indie Author Connect when you first started writing Armitage, or did that kind of come after? What was kind of the overlap there?
So Indie Author Connect just recently celebrated 1 year of its existence. I started it in like January of 2024. So it was not around when I started writing Armitage. It was just something that I decided to bring about because, again, when I was publishing my kids' book, I fell into the trap of one of the vanity presses,
Mm-hmm.
sunk a lot of money, got nothing in return, and I decided that I wanted to kind of give back to other authors, not collect anything for myself, but just kind of point them in the right direction so that way they don't fall into the same money pit that I fell into, and
Yeah.
waste their time and get nothing back. But as far as marketing, I've been kind of experimenting. When I first did it on leading up to the release of my book, I did writing tips and I did like author advice and stuff like that. And then I quickly realized that there are a ton of authors doing the exact same thing, giving their advice, and a lot of them were much more articulate than me, and they were doing it in a much better way than me. And I was like, these guys are just much better at it than me. I'll leave it to them. And I did interviews with people. I did book readings on TikTok Live for a while, and I've been thinking about going back to doing that because I really enjoyed doing that. It gave me the chance to meet a bunch of other authors. But then I was just like, I'm a goofy guy. Let me just try these influencer things that I always wanted to do back when Vine was a thing,
Yeah.
and let's just see if I can kind of staple my book to the video and make that happen. So it's all just like this evolving experimentation for marketing to see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to sum up self-publishing marketing is just
Yeah,
trying new things, experimenting all the time, seeing what works, um, and then also finding like what suits your personality well. Some people might try the writing tips, and I remember I tried to do that as well early on when I joined Book Talk, and I was just like, I'm not feeling it. So
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
you
think
kind of you
leaning
kind of
into
yeah, you get quickly burnt out when you're doing the writing tips and advice, and I think yeah, exactly. Just being yourself really works, and getting past the misconception that if you get a viral video, you're going to sell a bunch of books.
yeah,
Never happens. I've sold books on videos that only get like 100 views. I've sold more books on videos that I got 100 views than the few videos I've had that gone viral and made like 500,000 views. So yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's definitely an important lesson that you will learn when you're selling any product. I think is
yeah,
conversion rates are not what you think. You can have a lot of impressions, and that does not necessarily translate to sales. So,
yeah, exactly.
all right. Well, we talked writing, we talked editing and publishing. Let's talk reception of Armitage. How has both, the critical reception of it been review wise, and then how has the, if you don't mind sharing, for transparency's sake, be as vague as you want, like the financial success of publishing been for you?
Sure. I'll be relatively transparent. I actually didn't have any expectations going into this. I had hoped to reach as many people as I could. Did not think that it was going to be that many people, but I kind of had a goal just based on my research, seeing, you know, what the average independent or self-published author can expect to sell over the lifetime of their book, and I think it was like 500 copies or something like that over the lifetime of their book.
Yeah.
My book's been out for 8 months, and I think I sold. Here, I actually have it up right here. Um, as of today, I've sold 328 copies across all formats of my book. So that's
Very
kind of
cool.
nice. Yeah. I have not broken even. There is no profit, no positive profit there from the money that I've put in, whether that's restocking my books or paying for the conventions that I go to, the table costs, the booth costs. I sank a lot of money into experimentation with different programs that I bought, like formatting programs, Photoshop, stuff like that. And yeah, so because of that, I have not broken even on profit. I think I'm still like $6,000 in the red.
Gotcha.
But that's not to say that I haven't sold well. I think I've sold about $5,000 worth of books, not discounting any printing costs or shipping costs or anything like that. So
Very
yeah,
cool. Yeah, it's not often that we get to on Quill and Query to look at numbers like that. So I really appreciate you sharing that,
yeah,
especially for the people working on their first time book and not knowing what to expect. I think it's important that we set realistic expectations and we share with people what we can.
right.
So
If it's okay with you, I saw that we had a comment in
yeah,
TikTok. I'll
yeah,
go
go
ahead
right
and
ahead.
answer that. So when I first put out my book, I photoshopped my own cover. I grabbed a lot of stock images from um, Adobe stock, and I was pretty happy with my cover. But then I started realizing about a year after I developed my cover that Adobe stock actually uploads generative AI images and does not label them as such. So I got kind of worried that my book cover was using Adobe stock images that were generative AI that I then manipulated in Photoshop. So I went with my second edition cover, which is kind of a similar format to my first edition. This was done by Gamma Trap on Instagram, TikTok, whatever. Just to avoid if I did use generative AI unknowingly, I wanted to get rid of that right off the bat. And that was the cover. As far as the writing, everything's all me. I sit down, do that. I do use AutoCrit as a preliminary editing tool before I go to a professional editor. Elizabeth Merck is my editor. She's wonderful, and I will be using her for the future of at least this series and probably many other series as long as they're in a genre that she's okay working in. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, definitely. For anyone who's listening, be cautious of the stock photo sites because they do have AI images there, and they're not always labeled like Atlas said. So definitely be
Yeah.
careful. Do your research, and I always try to err on the side of caution.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also shout out to Gamma Trap for that awesome cover. I remember when you were doing the cover reveal for the new version. It was very cool. He's a very talented artist.
Yeah, he is. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we talked a little bit about the, I think the financial reception. Did we touch on the critical reception of Armitage and how, like reviews have come in and what people's reactions were to the book?
No, we haven't. So far, I've gotten pretty good reception, I feel. I've got 82, I think, last time I checked, reviews on Goodread, and about 37 of them on Amazon, and then a few over on Audible. Audible is 5 stars across the board, which is nice. But that's just a handful of reviews. And then Amazon and Goodreads, I've yet to receive a 1 star or 2 star, which I think is good. It means I haven't fallen out of my target audience yet. But I am looking forward to my first 1 star review or 2 star review. Hopefully, they put some feedback with it and I can kind of learn what I did wrong, or maybe I just reached outside of my target audience bubble.
Yeah.
So far, it's mostly 5 star ratings. I feel pretty good about that. It does seem pretty good. The only critical feedback that I've gotten, which I just today decided to lean into as a marketing tactic, is I put one chapter in my book that's specifically designed to be uncomfortable for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And almost every review that I've gotten touches on that chapter as being they were like, check your trigger warnings, or that's very uncomfortable for me to read. There's no holds barred, something like that along those lines. So I just decided, it's like, hey, it's chapter 25. Can you make it through chapter 25 is my marketing pitch now.
Yeah. That's a pretty good marketing pitch because they got to read a good way to get to chapter 25. So,
Absolutely. And, if nothing else, for those that are a little bit more sensitive, they know it's coming.
yeah, very true.
So,
And it's good that you said that your intention was to make people uncomfortable because it's a very different feeling when you write something that is not intended to feel that way to any extent, and someone comes to you with that. You're like, that is not what I was trying to set out to do at all. So,
kind of blindsides you, catch you by surprise.
right. All right. Well, it sounds like you've gotten mostly positive feedback, but and you said you published a children's book before Armitage,
Mm-hmm.
but what lessons did you learn from writing and publishing Armitage that you're carrying over into book 2 and any other subsequent books that you write?
Oh, man. I'm a lot more familiar with the whole process now. As I said, I fell into the vanity press. I approached a lot of artists and editors and formatters and stuff like that I probably will not be approaching again. So those are costly mistakes. I have found a really good editor, like I said, Elizabeth Merck, who edited this book as well as one of my short stories coming out here soon. She did a phenomenal job. I'm going to be sticking with her for a while. But I would say for anybody that's searching is do your research. That's kind of my motto when I got onto TikTok. Do your research to the best of your ability. Editors you can sample artists, you can sample all kinds of stuff. Use that to your advantage. Talk with them, build a rapport, and it'll make the whole publishing process, if you're going about it in that fashion, a lot more affordable and a lot more easy to digest.
And in regards to writing, do you feel that you're a stronger writer now that Armitage is out and you're going into book 2?
No,
No.
I think it's my extra critical. I'm very critical on myself,
Yeah.
so I don't feel like I've improved as a writer. But when I do go back and I read my first draft of Armitage and I read my first draft of Heritage, I can see that I've improved. That my
Hmm.
work with Elizabeth, because she teaches you along the way. She doesn't just edit. Her suggestions come with like reasons why and how you can improve in the future. And I feel like I've applied that. So I feel like my writing, not just my writing, but the way that I structure my story has gotten better. And I think that that's all lessons learned from being critical on Armitage. But at the same time, when I look at myself as here and now without any context of where I came from, it does not feel like I've gotten better. I feel like there's just miles ahead of me that I can improve.
Yeah, I think that's something that I don't really hear acknowledged that often. So it's refreshing to hear that, because I think, hindsight is 2020. You can look back a decent amount and see that you have improved, but it doesn't really feel like it a lot in the moment, like you said.
Yeah,
So it's nice to know that other people feel the same, because I definitely struggle with that sometimes.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get into that comparison of other authors online, and they're almost always posting the positives and never the negatives. So,
Right. Yeah.
when you start to feel down on yourself, it's like you have nobody else to compare to doing negative stuff. So,
Yeah. Very true. Well, when it came to writing Armitage, is in regards to the setting, the characters, anything really, did you have to do any extensive research to like ensure accuracy or anything like that?
yeah, when it came to Nico, my main character from the male perspective, he's grounded in reality. There was a lot that I wanted to get right, especially when it comes to how somebody would investigate or how they would look into this stuff. And especially with it being in 2002, I mean, hell, I was just entering high school in 2002, so my memory isn't the greatest. So I did a lot of research on like when the power goes out in a hotel, could they still use phones? I found out that they started using phantom powered phones, which require 20-volt, 24-volt connection, but some people still use analog phones. So as a point of contention, the hotel owner is very old school. He still uses like the old style keys with like the placard that has the room number on it. So it made sense for me to put an analog phone in his office. That was the only phone that worked during the power outage because it didn't require any kind of actual power. So that was a mechanism that I was able to build in just based on the research that I had. And then, of course, I had the questionable research. I just recently posted a video on of you know the big thing in any kind of like murder mystery is like how do you get rid of the body? How does the person not get caught for any long period of time?
Yeah.
So questions on how to conceal a body. Uh, that was a lot of research. I'm probably on an FBI watch list. Who knows? But that
Yeah.
was kind of fun to get into.
Yeah. That definitely fits under, the stereotype of writers having questionable search history.
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, yeah. Also, the telephone thing, very niche area of research that I was not expecting. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about challenges faced. I think we touched on some of them, but
Yeah.
for full transparency, was there any moment with Armitage that you just felt like you wanted to give up writing, or like it wasn't working, or did you not really feel that?
I did actually. So the way that this story came to me, the female main character just happened to be a black girl, and I struggled with myself a lot. Of you hear these things online, like if you're a white person, you shouldn't be writing a person of color story. It's not your story to tell.
Hmm.
So I talked to a lot of my coworkers who are also black. I talked to a lot of my friends who are also black. Like, should I be doing this? Most of them are not in the social media drama. They're like, yeah, why not? You just go ahead and do it. Shut the fuck up, kind of thing. Sorry,
Yeah.
again, pardon my French.
Oh, good.
But just because I'm not a woman and I'm not a black girl, I decided to go get beta readers that were people of color, and I got sensitivity readers to make sure that I was doing it justice, that I wasn't inadvertently hitting on any touchy stereotypes or anything like that. But I initially tried to swap her race. I was like, this isn't that big of a deal. I'll just swap her. She'll be a white girl now. And I hit like a 3 month writer block. I could not power through it. And I couldn't figure out why. I was like, it's not that hard, until I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go with my original concept. And then the words started flowing, and I ended up finishing the book like in 3 weeks after that. So that was my biggest challenge, was kind of trying to battle the story as it was just funneling to me. I was trying to, in my mind, artificially manipulate the story that was, you know, being told to me, and I was, documenting. And I decided I'm not going to do that again. However, the story comes to me is how I'm going to document it. I'm not going to try and fight that river anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's something to be said about. There's only so much you can do in regards to that, right? It's definitely important to be sensitive and to make sure you're enlisting help if you can. I
Yeah.
think definitely check in on your real life friends, like you said, because social media, as much as it seems that way, is not always indicative of what real life is. So
Yeah.
definitely get a mix of perspectives. But I do really like that you touched on, that you did try to go into it with some sensitivity in mind. And I can kind of relate because I do struggle with the balance of I want to write some diverse viewpoints, but at the same time, I don't want to write them poorly. As
Yeah.
as a straight white man, I don't want to necessarily fall into the trope of what people expect me to write those characters like. So it's a difficult balance.
It is. And I mean, since we talked about research just a minute ago, I feel like accuracy to some degree also helps readers immerse into the story. If you're reading a story and then like me, I'm in IT, I read stories all the time where they get, IT facts wrong. And I'm just like, that's not real. And it immediately pulls me out of the story. So I
Yeah,
feel like on top of being sensitive, if you're being accurate about things, it helps the reader immerse themselves into your story a lot more easily.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I think we touched on your cover design, so I'm going to actually skip over that question. I don't know if we touched on timeline for Armitage. About how long was it from your initial concept to holding the book in your hands?
Uh, so from the initial concept to finishing the book first draft was about 8 months. I got it edited and had the final manuscript about 2 months later. But I didn't actually hold a copy because I knew I wanted to post it out in June. Just from research, I was told that that's when horrors and thrillers and stuff like that do better, is posting in June. So I had it done in like November of 2023. And with KDP, you can't schedule any further than 3 months out.
Yeah.
So that added quite a bit onto my timeline. So if I'm going from finish, it was like September 2023 to about April of 2024.
Hmm.
Or sorry, September of 2022 to about April of 2024.
Gotcha. So
So
that's
yeah,
looking like about a year and a half, if I'm doing my math right.
yeah, about a year and a half. Even though it took me only about 8 months to write the thing, 10 months to get it all polished and ready to publish.
Very cool. So it sounds like you were working on a pretty tight time frame then. At least comparatively. I know some authors get books out really fast. It
Yeah.
varies dramatically from writer to writer. So
Oh yeah, and I mean Heritage. I've been working on since September of 2023, so I started around the same time, and now
gotcha.
here I am in February 2025, and I'm maybe halfway through the first draft. So
Yeah.
it's
I know you
never a
said
guarantee that you get it done quick.
you're shooting for around like 100, 110 for Heritage, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
that about the same length as Armitage, or is it a little longer?
It's a little longer. Armitage is 84,000 words,
Gotcha.
just over 84,000 words.
Okay. Are you finding any difficulties with the different lengths, or is that just kind of coming naturally because of like the different POVs and the story growing and things like that?
Yeah, I think with the adding in the different POVs and the story that I have to tell, the length is coming a lot more naturally. Like I said, maybe about 50,000 words into it, but I don't really feel like I'm halfway through. So it
Yeah.
may overshoot that 110. And I'm not married to any kind of word count. It's just kind of what I was aiming for. I more or less just the story that needs to be told.
Yeah.
I'll go through and I'll tighten it up and that'll fix the word count, but it is what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always good to be flexible with the word count because things
Yeah.
change.
Right. Especially with your self-publishing, there's nothing really marrying you to that or,
Right.
you know, imprisoning you to that word count goal or timeline or whatever.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit about some of the tools you used for like when you did your cover yourself, and then also
Mhm.
for formatting and stuff. So tell us a little bit about what tools did work for you, and maybe which ones you stuck with now going into book two, and what you like about them.
Sure. I liked AutoCrit. Um, I also want to get into Grammarly because I think they do two different things. Autocrit was nice in how it kind of like picked out any plot points that maybe were kind of inconsistent, or word usage that was repetitive or passive or whatever. But it didn't do so great. Whereas Grammarly kind of focuses more on I would call that a line edit, is what Grammarly does, whereas Autocrit is kind of somewhere between a copy and developmental edit. I enjoyed it from that perspective, especially when it gives you like a grading score, like, hey, your book is, this percentage easy to read, or it compares to these novels or these authors or something
Yeah.
like that. I enjoyed that. One tool that I'm definitely going to stick with is Atticus. I've since learned how to do Adobe InDesign. So I'm going to be using that for my physical books. That was another thing that I did when I did my second edition print, is it gave me a little bit more flexibility, and it was another little learning curve. But I stayed with Atticus as far as my ebook printing because as I was diving into reflowable uh, EPUB files from Adobe InDesign, it got a little bit more into the weeds than I was ready for.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do that for the second book, but we'll see.
Yeah. As someone who's worked with InDesign for work, it can be difficult to learn. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, also I love AutoCrit and tools like that in Pro Writing Aid. I think they're really great, especially for giving you like editorial insight into, like you said, comparable books and reading grade level and things like that. Super helpful.
Especially when I was getting started and I didn't really know many other authors. It almost acted as like a critique partner in a
Yeah,
sense,
right.
and that kind of helped out.
If you don't have access to like a big writing group, it really does fill that role very well.
Yeah, I see we got another comment on TikTok. Mandy, yeah, I am planning to go with the same four narrators: Aaron Smith, Brandon Francis, Ori Nash, and Elise Hoffman. They did great, and I'm looking into. I've got another character that I added into this one that's a darker character, and I'm looking at one specific audiobook narrator, but I'm going to keep that one a surprise for now. I am planning to have the second book also on audiobook. That's my favorite way to take in books, so I'm going to try and stick with that as long as I can afford it.
That's actually very cool. I did want to touch on that earlier, and it totally slipped my mind until you just brought it up. You had multiple audiobook narrators for Armitage. So tell us a little bit about what it was like working with four different narrators. Like, were they all on board right from the start? And then how was it like coordinating? Did they all do like a different chapter? Or are they each a different characters? How does it work?
So it was kind of interesting, and I think that the way I went about it, even for most other authors, is going to be a little bit more unconventional. I have about 15 years background. I mean, you see with like my background here, all the whatever is music recording, audio engineering,
Yeah.
and I even did a few audiobooks, narrating a few audiobooks myself. So I decided I was going to produce this one, take all of their raw tracks, mix master, place them where they're supposed to be,
Yeah.
and it was a pain in the ass, but I loved the process because it, again, even just through that process, from them reading to me going through their readings, I found like 14 more typos from what I thought was a finalized version. So I was able to have them corrected. I was able to do all that stuff before the book released, and it was invaluable. But no, their schedules did not line up very well. Um, Elise was the first to get it done, and she had it to me in like February or March, I think. So I just had her takes, and then Aaron. Fortunately, he was the primary narrator. He was the next one to kind of get the tracks in, so that gave me a really good foundation to work with. So once Aaron gave me his tracks, I was able to mix and master his, and then drop Elise's parts where they were supposed to go, and kind of prepare for the next two audiobook narrators. Then Ori was next. I did a few working sessions with her. She was the first one that I sat in on a few working sessions where I got to kind of, you know, as she was reading, I'd be like, no, 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 I had this more in mind. Could you try this? And I'm sure that I annoyed the shit out of her and Brandon, because Brandon also did some working sessions with me. And it was fun. We joked around. We had some good times, but I also know that they were just trying to kind of do their job. They were trying to get their work done. And I'm kind of making stupid comments off to the side because I'm just like fangirling right now, hearing my book come to life. But yeah, so Brandon came in, got his stuff handed to me in May. The book was supposed to release in June. So I went through like a feverish week or two getting everything tied up and ready to go. And then I finished it off. I recorded my own acknowledgement section, and wrapped it all up in a nice bow and put it out there. Learned a lot of lessons following that too. Like ACX does not give a shit about a timeline. As soon as you publish it, it's whenever they get it done, they're going to publish it. So
Gotcha. Yeah, that I remember seeing things about that when I saw the audiobook coming up that you had multiple narrators, and I thought that was really cool, and I had a lot of questions about how that works. So that's very cool, and it
yeah,
definitely awesome that you had the experience, mixing going in. Um,
yeah.
did so you said you had have you done audiobooks before? I know you said you narrated. Have you like done the engineering before, or was this the first time?
Just for my own audiobooks. This was
Yeah.
my first time doing anything full cast or anything with other people. Um, I don't know how interested you are in it, but when you do audio engineering, like I record my own self playing guitar and stuff like that, and you get very familiar with it. The second that you the second that you bring in other people, you'll find out that there's a lot of things a lot of variables that you could not account for. Their studio space may not be as quiet as what you're used to working with, or, um, maybe the way that they handle their raw data is a little bit different than you have. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of variables that you go into working with, and it kind of becomes a pain in the ass. Fortunately, all of my narrators were incredibly professional. They handed me really high quality raw audio tracks to work with. And so it made it really easy to kind of balance them all out to make them sound as if they belonged together, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to jump ahead real quick to the last
Sure.
part of a question that I want to touch on. We did talk a little bit about the conception of Indie Author Connect, and I wanted to know how has that impacted your author career? Do you find it challenging to do writing and hold Indie Author Connect, as the community together? Or do you find that it's just like a naturally mutually beneficial relationship between the two?
It is challenging, but I never really intended Indie Author Connect to be something that I needed to manage. It
Mm-hmm.
was more or less a community where people could come together, and I was hoping that it would become something that kind of runs itself. I didn't want to be the single point of information for there. That's why I brought in editors. That's why I brought in cover designers into the Discord and into the community.
Yeah.
The website itself, I'm way backlogged with applications for readers, for editors, for audiobook narrators. That has become a challenge. I was hoping, I was thinking about finding somebody to help me kind of manage the website so that way I could get through some of these applications. And because it's not just like anybody that applies can get up there. I'll actually vet
Right.
them and make sure that they're not scamming people, that they're at a certain level of quality, so that way whoever comes in with IAX, they know what they're getting, and they have a standard that they're going to meet when they come with any service provider that they book there.
Yeah.
So the website is the hardest thing. The Discord and the Facebook group that I stood up, I wanted it to be self-managed in its own way. A writer asks a question about editing, and then you can get an editor that kind of comes in and gives them an answer, or a marketer or a cover designer can kind of answer some of that stuff. That's was my original intention. It wasn't something that was going to be micromanaged, if you will.
Gotcha. And I think it does achieve that pretty well in the Discord, at least from what I've seen. When someone poses a marketing question, usually I see, if not a marketer, people who have done marketing for their own books chime in, and then usually see an
Yeah.
editor pop in to answer the editing question. So I definitely think you're doing a
Yeah.
great job, um, you
Oh,
know,
thank you.
with the community that you set up over there. I've actually shouted it out on the podcast a few times as our we do weekly writing resources, although it's stopped being weekly because we don't record weekly anymore. But
Right, right.
Indie Author Connect was one of them more than once, I believe. So yeah,
And I
definitely.
got I got podcasts up on the website. I'll get you an application if you don't mind putting out. I can't remember. I don't think Quill and Query's on there, is it?
I don't think it's currently on there. I think I filled one out a while ago, but I may be wrong. It was either I did fill it out or I intended to, and I completely forgot. So
That could be
have,
on me. I'll check my email and make sure.
if I didn't, let me know, and I'll be happy to fill it out again, because it's also very equally likely that I forgot as well, because I tend
Yeah.
to do that.
Also,
Um,
by the way, you got your own question in the TikTok comments too.
oh, Mandy, will your book be on audiobook? Yes. I still am, like, I've been very transparent about, I'm back and forth whether I want to query A Night of Knives first or if I just want to go right into self-publishing. Either way, you'll get an audiobook. If I do self-publishing, I do intend to put all of my self-published works in audio format. For Blades for Hire specifically, I don't know that this one will be available in audio format, at least for a while, just because right now our focus is on donating the proceeds to charity, and naturally funding an audiobook would detract from that. So we'll still see about getting it in audio format, though. It's definitely not a no for sure on that one.
It's awesome.
Well, Atlas, I think I got one final question for you.
Sure.
Let's hear about your long-term goals as a writer. Do you see yourself staying in the self-published space for the long term, and do you want to explore trad publishing at any point? Do you see yourself writing in different mediums? Just give us what your plan or your dreams look like for your writing career.
I've got several stories that I want to tell that kind of span a few different genres. As I said, I got a short story coming out here soon. That's my first romance comedy with a little bit of spice thrown in.
Mm-hmm.
I lean a lot more on the comedy, and even the spicy sections, I don't take them seriously enough. There's like puns thrown in here and there. So that was kind of fun to write. I've got sci-fi stories that I really want to tell. I've kind of started working on a few of those. I don't plan on going traditionally published unless something comes my way. Like if I get big enough, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually talked about this with a traditionally published author, Jodi Picoult, and she brought up Amanda Hawking, who had set like 17 books that she had published in a very short period of time, just because they were backlog books. And she eventually took on a traditional publishing role. And my theory as to why that may have happened, instead of her staying self-published like she had for the 17 books, is that her plate got a little too full. It became very difficult to manage so many books, so many events. She was getting very popular very fast, and being asked to go speak at events and attend events, and it becomes very hard to do as a one-man show. So
Right.
traditionally published, if I get approached for that and the terms are right and I'm big enough and it makes enough sense, I'm not opposed to the idea. But for the time being, I have no problem managing the small amount that I have to do, since I'm not getting speaking engagements unless I seek them out. I'm not getting tons of fan mail or anything like that. It's all just me, and it's easy enough to manage right now, but that may change down the road. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, Atlas, it has been a wonderful interview. Thank you so much for bearing with me. Like I said, without my co-pilot, I think we still have a few people in the chat, so now would be the perfect time if you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to discuss before we sign off, or if anyone else in the comments or in the chat has questions or comments for Atlas. Now is the time. I'll open the floor for a few minutes. And Atlas, like I said, if you have anything you want to share before we sign off, floor is yours as well.
I would just say that this is a video that I just recently posted. I know you saw it. You commented on it. This mindset of indie authors. They're no better, no worse than traditionally published authors. Some of us have just chosen to take that path, but we take all of the same steps that traditionally published authors take. We get our books professionally edited, covers professionally designed, professionally formatted. We do everything that we can. And I would say don't shy away from indie published or self-published authors, because you may be missing out on maybe your next favorite read. Who knows? Mandy's got a question: how many books will be in your world? Right now, I had it originally planned for 3, this being number 1. But with how big the world is and how intertwined the stories are becoming, I may end up putting out a 4th. So that's my plan so far.
That's a very common occurrence, isn't it? Where we plan a
Yeah.
trilogy, or an author plans a trilogy, and it grows.
Well, it's going to be an interesting take too, with this being a thriller, and then the next one being almost like a high fantasy or an epic fantasy, whichever. It's going to be kind of weird to see how these tie together and how much carryover I have from initial readers who were just there for the thriller mystery, and who decide to stick around for this weird fantasy adventure that I'm taking them on.
Yeah, that's a great point that I've also thought about with my work in progress, which starts off as a murder mystery, but it's high fantasy setting, and the plot soon becomes a lot larger than that. So very curious to see how people will stick with that and what the reception will be.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Atlas, I think that's going to be it for this episode of Quill and Query. Like I said, thank you so much for giving me your time and bearing with me here without my co-pilot. You've been a great guest. For anyone who's just joining at the tail end or didn't catch the full episode, you can catch it on YouTube. I try to get it on YouTube and podcast platforms Fridays so that you can listen to it over the weekend if you didn't get a chance to catch it during the week. But yeah, I think that's gonna be all for me. Anything for the people, Atlas, before we sign off? I know you already shared
No.
something, so I just put you on the spot again.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I appreciate everybody who came and stopped by. If you're interested in a paranormal thriller, please check out my book Armitage. Leave your thoughts. If it's a 1-star review, by all means, roast me in the review.
Always good
And
mindset to have.
absolutely. And Brandon, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. All right. Well, thanks everyone in the chat. Thank you, Atlas. I will see you guys next time.
Take it easy, guys.